Just a quick follow up to that, sir. And my question might not be one of the best ones that we have today. But do you think with the rise of Hindutva and the rise of certain idea of Hinduism or Hindutva, which says, in my opinion, it equates Hinduism to the frameworks of other religions. So, do you think that the rise of Hindutva in that way is detrimental to the understanding of Sanatan Dharma? Before you answer, sir, I might be wrong in my evaluation, sir. So, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm grateful for the tone in which you have put the question, as well as the politeness with which you have put this question, because typically whenever a question of Hindutva comes, it's almost as if people have very rigid notions of what they think they know. So I'm happy that you're at least open to certain corrections. So let me try and answer this question in two levels. This is an extremely important question, so let me try and answer this at two levels. From pages, I think 162 to 166 of the book, I've specifically addressed this particular question, okay, where I've said that Hindutva should be seen less as a political project and more as a civilizational awakening project, okay. And I have said that the decolonial movements that have taken place in Latin America are replicated in Bharat in their own ways. So if it is possible for us to embrace the decolonial movements which happen in other continents and cultures, why are we struggling to actually embrace an indigenous awakening movement, so to speak? So I've clearly said that what is seen as Hindu nationalism, first of all, I wouldn't call it Hindu nationalism, I would call it dharmic civilizationalism. That is my distinction, okay? And I'm very clearly making the statement that dharmic civilizationalism, which is crudely dubbed as Hindu nationalism, is nothing but a decolonial movement where people are trying to access and reclaim their past, okay? And we are being told that if you try and reclaim your past or your identity or your history, you're a bigot, you're a xenophobe, okay? And you're someone who has a hatred for religious minorities. That is the accusation that typically comes. My point is, if you believe that accessing my past is detrimental to the minorities, then I'm sorry to say, you are the one who's pitting the minorities against my past. I'm not doing that, okay? If I'm merely trying to access my identity and I'm trying to ask myself, where do I come from? What are my origins? What is the core identity of this particular culture? And you're telling me that that exercise translates to exclusion of certain religious communities or exclusion of certain religious minorities, then by default you accept that there is a serious problem between the identity of the religious minority and my core religious identity. That is a problem inherent in that particular question itself, okay? Now, secondly, if as a community or as a group or a society, if I am being told that I am the only culture that cannot access its past, I think that's an extremely unreasonable position. And I think it's a grave injustice to a community which is being told to sever all its relations with its past, either in the name of social harmony or in the name of secularism or whatever it may be. This is one thing that I've specifically addressed. Three, I will tell you where you and I agree and where there's a common ground. Okay, the common ground to be met is every societal discussion, when it is elevated to a political discussion, becomes a crude discussion because politics understands only a crude language. Okay, and it's very, very difficult to expect any degree of nuance or subtlety in a political discussion. Okay, so if you read the book, I've been very, very clear about saying that decolonial exercise that the society must carry out must first happen in the heart of the society and must not start from the state. In fact, I've clearly said schools, communities, colleges, religious institutions must start this particular journey as opposed to state undertaking this particular journey, and which is precisely what scholars in other jurisdictions are also saying, that when you decide to make it, let's say, solely a political project, it will have the direct effect of excluding a lot of people from the vision of your country. Okay. Therefore, you started as a societal project so that there is a certain degree of calmness associated with it. Because you see, politics is almost a zero-sum game. For somebody to gain, somebody else has to lose. Okay. Therefore, the moment you escalate such a serious discussion to the realm of politics, and if it starts in the realm of politics, it is bound to have a serious divisive effect. However, if it starts at the realm of the society, there is a significant hope that it will translate to truth and reconciliation, that more people will understand what has happened in this country, and more people will be able to accept the mistakes of the past and hope to not repeat those mistakes. Okay. So, frankly speaking, I am not averse to the word Hindutva. I dare say that I am not averse to the concept of Hindutva. I am merely going to make the statement that as far as Hindutva is concerned, it must start in the realm of the society first. I don't even have a problem with the concept of a political Hindutva because I think it's extremely relevant and it's extremely necessary. The problem is the mischaracterization of political Hindutva as a xenophobic, ethnocentric, anti-minority, majoritarian position. That is where the problem starts. So if people want to have a serious, rigorous discussion on what is the nature of Hindutva, what are the elements of Hindutva, this is something that I have addressed in significant portions in the book itself. But in the next book, I will try and make sense of it even better, because the question that you've just posed to me is a question that I've got from others saying, is there a possibility of understanding Hindutva without reference to Savarkar, so to speak? That is one of the questions that have been asked. Can it be, is it possible for us to think of or conceptualize a framework of Hindutva without necessarily referring to Savarkar? I've been asked this question, so I'll try and answer the question in the next book. But without running away from your question, I'm 100% clear that the manner in which Hindutva has been understood and projected in popular discourse is a gross and deliberate misinterpretation of what it actually stands for. Because the people of this particular country, at least the majority of this particular country, are basically saying, please don't deny our roots, please don't negate or reject our culture, and please don't tell us that any exercise or attempt to reclaim our culture is nothing but, let's say, commitment of atrocities on the minorities. That cannot be the position, because I am being told that I must forget my past in order to, let's say, maintain the peace in the present, which I don't think is right. If I am being told that the only way to maintain peace is by not only forgetting my past, but also accepting all the untruths that are being taught to me in the name of history, that is something that I will certainly not accept under any circumstances. Any peace or any relationship or any equation which is built on the foundation of untruths and on the basis of distortion of history is ephemeral and is temporary and is bound to crumble and shatter at some point.